tutorial, we're going to learn to make these bulky sleep socks, and that's exactly what they are. They're slipper socks for sleeping in. If you know anyone with cold feet, these are a very good option for winter time. They come in 3 sizes for men, women, and kids. They can be made any length, and those sizes are really for the width of the foot. If you'd like to get your copy of this pattern to follow along, here's a link on screen to my website. You'll also find a link to my website in the video description field below. Now these are knit toe up with bulky yarn, which means they work up really quickly, which makes them awesome for holiday gifts because, well, not only do they feel good and they're made of wool, but that you can get a lot of these cranked out pretty quickly. For the men and women sizes, I wanted to knit these as long as possible, and toe up socks make that possible. You can knit the foot and then just use all the rest of your yarn on the cuff and run out of yarn, and so they can be as long as possible using only one hank of yarn. And to do that, you'll want to take the main color that you're using in the socks and wind it into 2 equally sized balls. And I did this using the kitchen scale. I have a ball winder at home, which I know not everybody does, but it makes it easy to use a kitchen scale and the ball winder at home. You can also do this at your local yarn shop. They usually have a scale, a postal or kitchen scale available, so you can do the fancy trick of winding it into 2 balls of yarn. Now, normally with sock patterns, I say if you've never knit socks before, it's good to start with cuff down and then move on to toe up socks as you get more experience. These are really easy, and the fact that they're done in bulky yarn makes it really easy to see. So even if you've never knit socks before, this is a fine first sock project. I'm going to walk you through the whole thing. Am I missing anything? Oh, yes. I'm going to demonstrate how to do these on double pointed needles, but if you are comfortable working with the magic loop method or 2 at a time, you can certainly do that. I'm going to stick with 1 at a time on double pointed needles, which is actually how I prefer to work these. And next up, we're going to start with the provisional cast on and the toe. Once you have your 2 colors of yarn and your pattern and your needles, whether you're using double pointed needles or a long circular needle, you're almost ready to go. You'll need a crochet hook. This is all listed out on my website as well as in the pattern, all the materials you'll need. You need a crochet hook just for a little while because we're using a provisional cast on, a crocheted provisional cast on for these. So you just need to know, I'm going to show you how to chain, and that's all you need to do. You don't really need to know how to crochet. Let's go ahead and take a close-up look at the socks. These socks start in the contrasting color to knit the toe, and we knit around using wrap and turns. Then we knit the foot of the sock, and we do the heel the same way that we did the toe in the contrasting color. Then we knit the length of the socks using up all the rest of our yarn, and we switch back to the contrasting color and knit in 2x2 rib and bind off. Now let's get started right away. Of course, all the details for making these is listed out in the pattern, row by row. I am just going to show you the techniques used here. This sounds counterintuitive, but you want to start out with your main color of yarn and tie a knot in the end of that yarn and then make a slip knot. We're actually doing the crochet chain for the provisional cast on. You're going to chain the number the pattern tells you to for the size, and all I'm doing is just grabbing the yarn and pulling it through the loop. But if you need a slow demonstration of the crochet chain, I'll give you a link right here. So that's all you're going to do is crochet the number the pattern tells you to, cut the yarn, and pull that end through. Now, our crochet chain here, you'll see that this side of it is a series of V's, and the other side is the spine of the crochet chain. And we're going to pick up stitches in the spine. And remember that knot that we tied in the end of the yarn before the slip knot? Make sure that knot is over here in your right hand, because we're going to start picking up from the slip knot side to the not slip knot side. So we want the provisional cast on to be in the main color of yarn because we want it to be different than the color of yarn that we're using for the toe. And I have my toe color here now. Put your needle under one of those spines, hyphens, and take your main color yarn or contrasting color yarn, wrap it and pull it through. We're going to pick up stitches along the spine, and this is like knitting with one needle. You go under the next spine, wrap it and pull it through. And you're going to do this all the way across, picking up the number you need for the size you're knitting. I am just going to pick up a small number, fewer than the pattern calls for, just so I can demonstrate the techniques. I'm just going to pick up 10. This is not the actual numbers from the pattern, this is just the techniques. Okay. Once you get those picked up, you want to purl back across the row. And we're using double pointed needles, but we are not knitting in the round yet. Okay. Now we're ready to start our wraps and turns. And the short row is what's going to get us around the tip of the toes. Short rows and wraps and turns and picking up the wraps. So this is all written out row by row in your pattern, but I'll give you an idea of how this looks. We're going to knit across these stitches to the last stitch, and then we're going to wrap that stitch. And once you get to the last stitch, pull the yarn forward between the two needles, slip that stitch to the right needle, turn the work, slip that stitch back over to the right needle, and you're going to continue purling across. And by doing that, you've taken the working yarn and wrapped it around the base of that stitch. The very edge stitches are a little different on the wraps and turns than subsequent stitches, so I'm going to be sure to show you the difference. I'm also going to put glasses on. I was feeling like something wasn't right, and it's like, wow, I can't see. Now I can. Okay, I'm going to do a wrap and stitch on this, a wrap and turn on this last stitch. So I'm purling now. I'm going to put the yarn back between the two needles, slip that stitch to the right needle, turn the work, slip that stitch over to the right needle, and then knit across to the second to last stitch. The wrap and turns are a little bit easier from here. Okay, 2 stitches left. Yarn forward, slip that stitch, yarn back, put it back over to the left needle, turn the work. And I've put a wrap around the base of that stitch. And on a wrong side row, don't worry, I'll show you this all again. Wrong side row, 2 stitches left. Pull the yarn back between the 2 needles, slip that stitch, pull the yarn forward between the 2 needles, slip it back, turn the work. And the exact way of doing this is also written out in the pattern. I'll show you a right side row again. And this time it's 3 stitches from the end. Yarn forward, slip, yarn back, slip, turn work. And on the wrong side, yarn back, slip, yarn forward, slip, turn work. Okay, you're going to keep doing that for as many times as the pattern tells you, and then when you're halfway finished with the toe, it's time to go back and pick up those wraps. And you can see the wraps are here around the base of these stitches. And this is how you're going to pick up a wrap. The first wrap, which is a little bit different than the subsequent wraps. You can see that this horizontal line here is the wrap. Take the tip of your right needle and pick it up and put it up on the stitch with the needle and knit those two together. Now we need to turn our work again, so we're going to put a second wrap on this stitch. Yarn forward, slip, yarn back, slip, turn work. I'm going to purl back to the first wrap. And it's not as easy to see the wraps on this side. I like to flip my work this way and look at the right side of the work. And there's my wrap. I'm going to do just like I did before and put it up on the needle and purl those two stitches together. Then I'm going to put a wrap on this next stitch, yarn back, slip, yarn forward, slip, turn the work. I'll knit up to the next wrap. And this time there are two wraps on the stitch because I added that second wrap. I'll pick up the first wrap, I always do it separately, and the second one, and then knit those three together. Then I need to put another wrap on the last stitch. So I yarn forward, slip, yarn back, and then I can turn the work before I slip that stitch back. I'll show you how to do the double wrap on the wrong side. I turn my work this way so I can easily see what I'm doing and pick up each wrap separately, purl three together, and add a second wrap to the last stitch. Yarn back, slip, yarn forward, turn the work and slip it back. Now I'm going to pick up the wrap on the last stitch. These socks don't take long to make, but it takes a little longer than this, because I'm almost finished with the toe already. I'll pick up both of those wraps, knit three together. I did split that yarn. Turn the work. And then as I go into picking up the last wrap, actually I want to fix this because I corrected it the wrong way. As I go into picking up this last wrap, I want to slip this first stitch. I don't want to, if I were to purl it, I'd create more of a gap here, so that's just a policy I have. If you do purl it, it's not that big of a deal. But I want to eliminate the gap between the two halves of the toe at this point. Okay, I'm going to pick up these two wraps and purl three together. Okay, that is the toe worked. I'm going to work across these stitches one more time. I'm going to slip that first stitch. Again, just to try to keep from creating too much height here. Now my working yarn is at the provisional cast on, and that's what we're doing next is we're taking out the provisional cast on and we're going to change color and start working in the round. You've followed your pattern row by row for the size that you're knitting, and once you work back across those stitches we just did with the wraps and turns, you're ready to remove the provisional cast on and start knitting in the round, which is exactly what I'm going to do right now. So let's go back to the sample we just finished in the last segment. Here's my working yarn, here's my provisional cast on. I'm ready to take out this pink yarn and have live stitches again. So this is how this is going to go. The slip knot end is over here on the left. This is the not slip knot end. And if everything's gone well and you've worked back across those stitches, this is where you're, this is the way you should be set up right now. Remember when we finished off this chain, we just pulled the end through the last loop. I'm going to undo that and unzip some of these stitches. Now the first stitch I need to pick up actually has the yarn running through it. You see this pink yarn and this blue stitch? I'm going to create a little slack here and pick up that stitch with my needle. You'll see that it's good to have a contrasting color of yarn for your provisional cast on. It makes it easy to see. Now the rest of these stitches aren't going to have the yarn running through them. They're just attached to the blue yarn. The pink is holding on to the live stitches. What you want to do is, oh, I just lost my stitch. What you want to do is go under the right leg of each V that you see across the work here, the top row of blue stitches. Go under the right leg, and I usually like to go under a few at a time, and then pop the provisional cast on out. You put half the stitches on one needle and grab another needle. Go under the right leg for the other half of the stitches and pop the provisional cast on out. Bulky yarn makes this so easy. It's kind of different when you're using sock weight yarn or even worsted. Bulky yarn really makes this easy. Now the provisional cast on is gone. I want to continue using this blue yarn across the stitches I just picked up from the provisional cast on. But there's one thing I want to do, and that is to take a look at the space between this stitch and this stitch. And if I do my first stitch, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do my first stitch and put it on the needle and take a look at it. And if there's going to be a huge gap right here, I want to pick up a stitch in that space. Now mine doesn't look like it's going to be a huge gap, and so I'm not really worried about it, but this is what I would do. I put my needle under two legs of something here, wrap it and pull it through and take a look. That's leaving a hole. That looks good. And if there was a gap here, that would really close things up and look good. And then I just continue working across the rest of the stitches, and on the next round I would decrease those stitches back out. Now it's possible that I'm going to have a gap on this other side, but probably not. Tighten everything up here. You can actually tie a knot with the two blue yarns there to keep things tidy. At this point, after you work in your contrasting color across the stitches from the provisional cast on, you can cut that yarn because we are going to attach the main color of yarn now. And this is pink in this case. So I go to the next stitch, put my needle in, just fold my yarn over and loop that around the needle and pull that stitch through. You just start knitting with the new color and suddenly, bang, your new color's attached. And from here, it's just a matter of going around and around and around to knit the foot. And you can knit any shoe size as long as you get the length right. There's a little sample. You can knit any shoe size as long as you get the length right, and in the pattern I give you very specific instructions for how long to make it for any given shoe size. And I also give you a very handy link to a chart that converts European sizes, UK sizes, American sizes into inches and centimeters, which makes it easy if you're making gifts for other people who don't live nearby, or if you want to surprise them. If you know that someone wears a size 8 shoe, you'll know exactly how long to make the sock for them. Next up, we're going to talk about working the heel. Once you get the length of the foot correct, it's time to start knitting the heel. And the heel is worked just like the toe, with the same wraps and the same turns. It's kind of amazing to think that something that would make the toe of a sock is actually the same thing that will make the heel. Let's go ahead and take a close-up look. Here is my tiny little sock, and before you ask what the pattern is for this baby sock, it's not a baby sock. It is proportioned for adults and kids, and it would never fit a baby properly because babies have fat little square feet and ankles. This is just a tiny demonstration. This is the heel in the same exact stitch as we used for the toe. Hard to believe, but I'm going to show you how this works. I have knit the length of my foot here, and I'm ready to attach the heel here. I am going to use pink yarn for this because I don't have the green yarn that I used. This technique is the same. I'm going to attach my contrasting color of yarn and work across to the last stitch, and I'm going to wrap and turn that stitch. Now that stitch is going to be in the old color, do not worry, because when we pick up the wraps, they'll be in the new color and they'll cover it up. Oh, I should also mention something before I forget. I did not break the main color of yarn. You can just leave that ball of yarn attached because it will be in the right place when you need to get back to it. So there's my last stitch. I'm going to wrap and turn. And you get the idea there. The heel is worked exactly the same way. You pick up the wraps exactly the same way, and the pattern, of course, will walk you through each one of these row by row for each size. So when you're finished, you're back to this, and I finished the heel, and so I broke the yarn, and my main color is attached right here, ready to go. I did not need to break the yarn. It's very cool. And even if you didn't need to pick up extra stitches to fill the gap at the toe, it's more likely that you might have a gap there after working the heel. I'm going to show you. I'm going to work this first stitch. I'm going to work a couple stitches, then slide them back over so I can look at this. You can see here we do have quite a gap there. So I'm going to undo those stitches and pick up an extra stitch like I demonstrated for the toe. I'm just going to poke my needle in, wrap it and pull it through, and then look at it and make sure it isn't pulling too hard. And that looks good. So I can work across the rest of the row, or the rest of this needle. And then at the other side of the heel, I want to check it again. And that's a pretty significant distance there. I'm going to want to pick up an extra stitch. So I'll try it here. Take a look. I think that looks good. And work across that way, and then just don't forget to decrease those stitches back out. Those are the most difficult parts of the socks for sure, because the rest of the rest of the heel from where I just left off, the rest of the sock is just going around and around in the main color. And then when you are, if you're knitting the men's or the women's size, you can make these using all of the yarn. The kid size, you'll end up with thigh highs if you use all of the yarn. But for the men and women, you can use up all of your yarn. When you run out of yarn, you switch back to the contrasting color and knit in 2x2 rib. And then there's also the yarn over bind off I use, which is bind off, yarn over, bind off, yarn over, which gives you a nice stretchy heel. And there are more details about that in the pattern. Anyway, I think that's it. Good luck.